friends. I want to introduce to you my oldest daughter, Sara Elena. I'm Flor Elena, journalist, mom, wife, and I really want you to get to know my daughter, Sara Elena, a little bit. She's actually a worship leader and a wife herself. But my youngest daughter, Taylor Sophia, says very often, Mom, we all know that Sara Elena is your favorite of all the children. And it's not that she's the favorite. It's that we have a very neat relationship and an interesting one, isn't it?
Yes.
Because my second child, David, Mark, was born very, very healthy, but then ended up being very sick. And she actually became a right hand of sorts. You sent me, Sarah, a quote not too long ago that said, we grew up together and then we raised a few. And I thought it was so funny in a sense. But truly, if it wasn't for Sarah, that helped me so much. You helped me so much with my third daughter, Rachel Carolina. And Sarah would actually say when I would go into, when David had therapy, Sarah would say, hey, Mom, you stay with little Rachel and I'll go into therapy with David. Did you not?
Yes, I did.
How was that experience, having a little brother that was sick?
It was good. I think it definitely taught me a lot about being more responsible and about taking care of people and taking care of others before yourself, really. And it teaches you a lot of how to manage different things in your life. And I think that I learned a lot and grew a lot through those experiences.
When you were in high school, I don't know if you remember, Sarah, in the middle of high school, I got a call from your academic counselor. And the academic counselor said, hey, Mrs. Robledo, I want to talk to you about your daughter, your oldest daughter, because she has dreams that are far beyond high school. And Sarah actually entered into a dual enrollment program and took herself out of high school, basically, to join worship more. Talk to us a little bit about that experience. What did worship do for you at this time?
Well, I had just moved from Miami, Florida to Keller, Texas. And when you're in middle school, that's a really big jump with a lot of cultural changes. And I didn't really feel like I fit in super well at the beginning. I was maybe 12 years old. And so it was hard kind of finding a place where I felt like I really belonged. And then that's what my church ended up kind of filling that void for me. So I got really involved there. Some of my best relationships, I got married recently, and I still have some of my best relationships that were my bridesmaids. So it was very fruitful for me.
Absolutely. Between high school and college, you went to a youth conference, I recall. And one of the leaders in the youth conference received a beautiful word for you about light, about you being light and you being called to live and walk in light. And if I may, I'm going to take this painting out because you were painting this painting during that season, right?
Yes, I was.
And what was the word about? Share a little bit about the light and the darkness and what that was all about.
Well, I was at Gateway Student Conference. It was the summer of my senior year of high school, which is a really transitionary period for anyone, I think, because you're figuring out where you're going to go to school, what you're going to study, what you're going to do for the rest of your life. There's a lot of major decisions happening in one very small period of time. And so with this painting, I remember painting it because I was feeling just a little bit lost and confused, I think, on what these next few years were going to look like for me. College can look very different for a lot of different people, depending on how you approach it and how you go in, thinking it's going to go, or planning for it to go. And so I remember when I drew this, or when I painted this, I was by myself, and I really just felt a collision between what I thought I wanted to do versus what I felt like maybe God was showing me or where God was guiding me. And so I was feeling very confused at that time. I think really is the perfect word for it. And so at the student conference, it's a Gateway student conference, so it's pretty enormous. There are a lot of students there. I think in that room in particular, there were about 4,000 there that day. And I was just one of the 4,000. And a girl came up onto the platform after worship, and she said she had a word for somebody in the room. And I'm obviously thinking not me, because I serve at this church, I worship here, I'm here all the time. Like, it's going to be, you know, someone that flew from out of town for this or something, not someone that's here every week. Right. So I really didn't think it was me. And then she came up and she was like, I feel like someone painted a flower or like drew a flower. I'm seeing like a sunflower, and I'm seeing that it's kind of half in light and half in dark. And I had just painted this the night before. So I was like, oh my goodness. And I hadn't told anyone about that. So she would just basically went on to say, if you feel confused or lost, just know like God has his hand on you and he really sees you and you're light. You're not the dark. And that's something that you're going to need to pursue. And it was definitely a journey. I'm not going to say after that moment, everything was just, you know, rainbows and butterflies.
Yep.
But it was definitely, it was nice to get a word like that so specific, especially going into such a confusing time with so many different choices. So
why do you think that so much of the youth, you've brought up an excellent point. Why do you think that so much of the youth in our country gets lost in the college years, Sarah?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that are changing, a lot of things that are happening. You're used to your environment with your family and your parents and your customs that you're used to. I think it's definitely harder if you move away for college. And I know that that's kind of an unpopular opinion. I moved away for college. I moved from Texas to Arizona because at the time I was still not warmed up to Texas. It took me a very long time. But I did go to a school that I feel like God really drew me to going there. I had a church campus there. I had already a good community set up there. So I knew what I was going into when I went into it. But I think that that's probably one of the biggest things, because I think a lot of parents really try to create an environment that's good for their kids. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's amazing. But I think the moment they step out, if you don't have a real relationship on your own, that's with God, and you don't have your own convictions and your own, this is okay for me to do, this is not, you don't have your own guidance, you haven't found that yet, it's so easy to just slide off. I think that's what happened. Absolutely.
After college, you went on to marrying a couple of months after graduating, just like I did. A little bit about me, obviously, Sarah's mama. She's my oldest, and she is the oldest of four. Right after her comes Rachel Carolina, which is, I call my gorgeous girl. She's gorgeous inside and out. And then there's Taylor Sophia, which is my little one. And of course, that's not counting David, Mark, who's waiting for us in heaven. My son, who was born very healthy, but ended up being very ill, who you helped me so much with, like we talked about, and then passed away. I want to bring up, coming back to, people say that Sarah's my favorite child. The best teaching I've ever heard on this. I do call you the better version of me. Our wedding rings actually are very similar, but hers is like so beautiful. And I always say, you're the better version of me. She's like, no, Mom, we're each ourselves, right? But truly, the Lord speaks of not showing favoritism, right? Not having favoritism. And the best teaching I ever heard on this is actually a true story of a mom who passed away, and her children were talking, just chatting about her and her passing afterwards. And one of the children says to the other, hey, Mom always told me, I just wanted you to know that I'm her favorite. And kind of like, it reminds me of the story of Joseph, right? In the Bible. And the other sibling says back, oh, no, that's not right. Mom always told me that I was a favorite. And truly, that's how the Lord wants us to grow up, right? To feel like his favorite child, to believe that we are the apple of his eye. He wants us to grow knowing and sensing that if we would be only us, he would go to the cross. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. He would have gone to the cross if it was just for us, because we are the apple of his eye. But truly, Sarah went on after college and married her husband 3 months later, just like I did. And then she ends up marrying into like my favorite family. I mean, truly, it's one of the most beautiful families in the whole wide world. And so it's just finding or being able to have a child as satisfying as my oldest daughter has been, and the example that you have set for your sisters. I don't know how to ever thank you for that, Sarah. What role does marriage play in your generation, Sarah?
Well, I think that marriage has really transitioned societally in a lot of different ways. I think that, before it was very much, that was a lot of goals for a young woman, was to be married. And I don't see that as much anymore among my peers or among different people that I talk to. Marriage has sort of become like a last, once you've achieved all the things you're going to do on your own, then marriage is a good idea. It's very solo for a long time. And I think that has a lot to do with just as a society, technology, all these different things, we've gotten to the point where everything's very customized to exactly what we want. We can change it if we don't like it. There's a million other options if you don't want it, kind of a thing. And so with that, you become very self-centered, I think, and your world kind of revolves around you. And I don't think that that's necessarily something people do intentionally. I think it's just kind of a product of their environment in a lot of different ways. But I just think that marriage involves a lot of selflessness and a lot of compromise and a lot of willing to be each for the other. I remember I was long distance with Zach for a long time. So he was here in Texas and then I was off in Arizona. And there were a lot of things I wanted to go to that he wasn't really comfortable with me going to. And that was hard for me. That's, it's frustrating. You're like, it feels like you're being told what to do almost. And that's not an easy thing, especially if you have a stronger personality, then it's really not ideal. But that's part of it. If he didn't feel comfortable with me going to something, I didn't go. Or if I didn't feel comfortable with him going to something, he wouldn't go. And I think that just level of selflessness, I'm going to do this for you. You're going to do this for me. We're in this together. It's a team. It's not all about me. And I think that's really hard for a lot of people now to grasp that and to even want it in the first place.
And I just want to say, I love her husband so much. He's just a good and perfect gift to our family.
Yes.
I had never, for example, been able to get rid of all of the paraphernalia and the little clothes and the things of my son all these years. How many years has David been in heaven now? Maybe 12. And yeah, he'd be 19 now. My son would, and truly this just last week in my walk with the Lord and in my growth, upon receiving such a gift into our family, like it has been Zach, your husband, I've been able to release finally and get rid of all those little things because the Lord has added to our family so beautifully, and we feel so blessed and full and complete. And then his family has become our family, and so it's very beautiful. It reminds me of Ruth, right? That beautiful verse that says, "His people will be your people, and his God will be your God." Worship. Using your giftings and talents for the Lord. This was a verse that came to life for me just this last year, where Romans speaks of that our giftings and our talents are gifts that God gives us. And what we do with them really is our gift back to him, is it not? And so you have utilized your gift. You have put your heart and your mind and your discipline and your effort since a very young age. I would say 11 years old. The very best Mother's Day that I've ever had, because Mother's Day for me is a little bit bittersweet, because I have these beautiful blessings and 3 beautiful princesses, and then my boy who's in heaven. And my most beautiful Mother's Day ever was the first time that Sarah led worship, consequently for the Sunday school class of her little sister. So how full could my heart have ever been? My heart could not have been more full than that Mother's Day. And so I wanted to ask you, how is it that using your giftings and talents for the Lord, the scriptures say, remember me in the days of your youth, so that days don't come to you where you say woe unto them. How is it that using your gifts and talents for the Lord and investing those in him through your youth and while you grew up affected you, Sarah?
Well, I started young. And so I think that starting young and putting that as a priority throughout your life, it becomes so much easier to continuously make God a priority as you get older, when he's already been in that spot in your youth. I think that for me, worship was very rooting always. Like I said, I went away to college. I went to Arizona for school, but I did have a Gateway Scottsdale campus. Now it's another name, but Gateway Scottsdale for me was very rooting. So even if, let's say I had a bad week and I, maybe did some things that I shouldn't or something along those lines. Church, I go to church on Sunday, or at least on the weekends always, or on Wednesdays, or once a week during the week. I'm used to that. So it's almost not that it's obligatory, because it never felt that way. But it did feel like, okay, I need my rooting back. Like I need my grounding back. And I think that worship was also a way. Worship is all about giving, right? Worship is love expressed. That's what I was taught. And so worship is really just receiving God's love and being able to give that to other people via music. And music, honestly, is a brilliant way to do that, because everybody loves music. There's no, people don't really have issues with it, problems with it, the way they may have qualms with different teachings or things like that. Music is always let in. It's God was genius in doing that, I think. But being able to bless other people always helps you also in the long term. And so I think always having that sense of I'm giving and I'm going to be a steward of the gift God has given me. But to do that, I need to be in a good relationship with God if I'm going to bless these people, because if I don't have this, I can't do this. So very grounding, very rooting. It's a sense of responsibility. I'm carrying this, and I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it well. I'm not going to be up there if I don't have this. I'm just giving people songs. And don't get me wrong, songs are great, but they're not worship.
They're not. And I just love what you've brought up, because you've literally brought up the cross. I mean, if we're in a good vertical relationship with the Lord, then we can sort of extend that horizontally. Right. And you can't do that any better than in worship.
Right.
And so I just think that you've expressed that so preciously. And this is no joke, y'all. Like, I would go visit her about once a month when you were in college.
Came a lot.
And literally we would schedule around the time where she would lead worship. I got to go to visit my daughter in college, and on Sunday at church, she was actually leading worship. So she would lead me in worship once a month when I would go visit her. Just amazing. Growing up in the Lord, in his ways, in the church, how did that help from your youth with what you went through, with having your little brother go to heaven, with losing a brother?
That's funny. I've talked to a lot of different people about that, because people have very different experiences in terms of how they come to the Lord. Some are raised with him, but many aren't. Many come to him later in life, which is just as incredible, of course. But the dynamic, at least from what I've heard from different people and just talking with them, friends of mine, the dynamic's very different. It's when you come to the Lord later on, it's like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. This is the experience that you had, or my father had as well, where it was like, where was this my whole life? I needed this. And so the transition I've noticed from one stage of life to another is really evident, as opposed to growing up with him. It's more like, oh, I did this, I shouldn't have done that. Oh, shoot. Okay, let me come back. Goes do something stupid. Okay, let me come back. So I think the dynamic's just very different. Sure. And being raised in the Lord, what that does, though, is it gives you the right thing to come back to. If you're not raised with the Lord, you don't have that compass, that internal reference of, okay, I know I'm not doing well right now. Let me get back to what's good. If you weren't raised with what's good, you wouldn't know what's good, and then you would have nothing to come back to. And a lot of my friends that I met at college weren't Christian. I mean, my first roommates were atheists. They were all atheists. I don't know how I ended up with all atheists, but I did. And so, I mean, they would get bothered if I had my Bible on my desk. They would be like, can you put that away, please? Even if it wasn't open, just sitting there closed. And so...
Yeah, they didn't know.
No, they didn't. But you know what? When they needed advice, when they needed something, they would ask me, or they would ask to go to church with me. Atheists, they would still, I'd say, I'm going to church. If you want to talk, we can talk on the way to church. You can come with me. And they'd come, and they never had a bad experience, and they were always okay with going. And that's what's good, right? But when you don't grow up with that, you don't have that reference. And so I think having that compass is just so important, and it's so beneficial when you have kids.
Absolutely. I love what you shared, because it reminds me of the verse, train up a child in the way they should go.
Right.
And when they're old, they won't depart. Because like you said and expressed it so beautifully, there's a compass to come back to. It also reminds me of the importance of a conscience. Mm-hmm. God says to keep a clean conscience, a good conscience. Mm-hmm. And so I when you shared about the compass and knowing what's right and knowing what's wrong and when you're off, right? And being able to recalibrate, I'm reminded of the conscience.
Yes.
Of sorts. And I also want to point out that what you shared about roots and having your roots in the Word and in church and in being raised in His ways, the deeper our roots go, and this is an encouragement to you, Sarah, and an affirmation for your future, because the deeper for you and your hubby, the deeper your roots go, the higher that you go.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to encourage you with that for you and for Zach and just all of our beautiful family. Maybe we should end in a word of prayer together. Lord, we thank you so much for this time together. We thank you for the beautiful relationships that you, Lord, ordain. We pray that we have a beautiful relationship with our audience that can ask us questions and comment and share your thoughts with us. We love having you, and thank you for having us. Blessings.